Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Jolene Rebecca Cummings, 34, had recently divorced and was a single mother. She and her ex-husband Jason shared custody of their 3 children. May 13, 2018 was a special Sunday. It was both Mother's Day and Jolene's 35th birthday. What should have been a happy day turned strange when Jason couldn't reach her. According to their original plan, Jolene and Jason were supposed to meet at Wendy's restaurant, where he would bring their 3 children to celebrate her birthday with their mother. However, Jason sat waiting for nearly an hour without seeing any sign of Jolene. Her phone was turned off and text messages went unanswered. Worried, Jason contacted Jolene's mother, hoping to find answers, but she also didn't know where her daughter was. When night fell and the search still yielded no results, both realized something was seriously wrong. They immediately reported Jolene's disappearance to police. When police received the missing person report, they immediately focused their attention on Jason. Completely understandable according to investigation protocol. In missing person cases, the closest relatives are usually the first suspects to be thoroughly examined, and Jason, admittedly, wasn't an ideal candidate for the title of Model X's band. He was financially well off but had a hot temper. Those who had witnessed Jason and Jolene during their happy times remembered a sweet couple, but marriage had revealed another side of him. Arguments became increasingly frequent, sometimes escalating to violence, all of which made Jason the #1 suspect in the investigators' eyes. Suspicions about Jason became more founded when police discovered that just days earlier, neighbors had called authorities because of a violent argument between the couple. Screaming and breaking objects from inside the house had made their 3 children cry hysterically, forcing those around them to intervene. When police came to examine Jolene's house, the scene before them only thickened the suspicion. Right at the entrance, they found her makeup bag scattered on the ground, as if it had been thrown down in haste or during a struggle. Stepping inside, they saw kitchen cabinet doors hanging on their hinges, clothes strewn from the bed to the floor, and most notably, large holes in the bedroom door. Clear signs of a fierce struggle. However, were these traces the result of the argument from a few days earlier? More concerning was that Jolene's most important personal items, her phone, wallet, and 2006 Ford SUV, had all vanished without a trace. In the interrogation room at the police station, Jason firmly denied any involvement in his ex-wife's disappearance. His attitude was confident, but it could also be the stubbornness of a man hiding the truth. However, suspicion wasn't enough to become evidence. With nothing concrete to charge Jason with, police had to release him and look for other leads. The search shifted to Jolene's last workplace, Tangle's Hair Salon, on May 15th. 2 days after she disappeared, investigators entered this familiar space, hoping to find new clues. The salon owner, Vicky, explained that the shop was closed on weekends, so the previous Saturday was the last time Jolene was present there. Her colleagues confirmed everything seemed normal when the work shift ended. Police decided to expand the investigation by collecting statements from all salon employees. Vicky immediately began contacting each person, hoping they could provide important information about Jolene's final days. But it was during this time that a strange development occurred, one that no one expected would become the key to the entire case. Jennifer Seibert, a salon employee, was driving to work and had nearly reached the parking lot when she received Vicky's text message about the police presence and plans to take statements from each employee. Jennifer's reaction was completely unexpected. Instead of parking and entering the salon as usual, she suddenly turned her car around and sped away from the scene. This fleeing behavior immediately set off alarm bells in the investigators' minds. Why would a regular employee appear frightened about talking to police? Hours later, Jennifer called to explain her strange behavior. She claimed she had discovered her ex-boyfriend was stalking and following her, making it unsafe for her to leave her car. Particularly concerning, according to Jennifer, this man was a hacker capable of infiltrating police computer systems. If they simply entered her name into the database, he would immediately know her hiding location. The story about the hacker boyfriend sounded too far-fetched to be believable. Jennifer's fleeing behavior had awakened their investigative instincts. When checking the personal records Jennifer had provided to the salon, a shocking discovery was revealed. From her residential address and social security number to her name, everything was fake. Even the name Jennifer Seibert she had been using wasn't hers. The truth behind this false identity was even more horrifying than initial suspicions. When searching the database, police discovered Jennifer Seibert was actually a little girl born in 1974 in Butler County, Pennsylvania, at age 13 during a family trip to Germany. The real Jennifer Seibert had died in a traffic accident on June 13, 1987. Her body was brought back home to Pennsylvania by her family for burial. So who was the woman impersonating the name of a dead child? When police asked about Jennifer, salon owner Vicky, and the employees began telling about her bizarre behavior. This woman had only been working at the salon for just over a month, but had already made everyone feel uneasy. Jennifer always seemed guarded, as if everyone wanted to harm her. She constantly looked around suspiciously, appearing tense with everyone. Worse still, her temperament was very unpredictable. Even a small disagreement could make her explode and cause violent arguments. But the most frightening thing was that she often secretly followed coworkers after hours. Many people had discovered Jennifer sitting in her car, watching them from afar without any clear purpose. Everyone felt there was something wrong with her mental state, and were all somewhat afraid. We all knew she wasn't normal, one employee shared. The investigation expanded to surrounding stores and revealed an alarming fact. In the past 6 months, Jennifer had continuously job-hopped through 5 different workplaces. Each place had strange stories about her. Before coming to Tangle's, she had worked at Bottomless Grill restaurant. The manager there still remembered the bizarre image of Jennifer eating. While everyone used knives to cut steak, she would grab the meat with her bare hands and tear it piece by piece in a crude manner. This scene made both customers and employees feel uncomfortable. Of course, she lasted less than a month there. At 2 other hair salons where she had worked, the story was no different. One manager shared, her priority now was to catch Jennifer before she disappeared completely. Lux smiled on the investigation. Just one day after the search began, patrol officers in neighboring St. Johns County discovered the target. On the evening of May 16th, they found Jennifer sleeping in her Kia at a deserted parking lot. The scene inside the car showed she had been camping there for quite some time. Police immediately arrested her and brought her to the station for questioning, hoping to finally get answers about Jolene's mysterious disappearance. Jennifer's attitude in the interrogation room was completely opposite to what investigators expected. Instead of being worried or tense like someone who had just been arrested, she appeared strangely comfortable, even smiling, as if having an intimate conversation with friends. The first thing that caught police attention were the obvious wounds on her face and hands. When asked about their origin, Jennifer gave a simple explanation that she had been in a bicycle accident and crashed into a tree. While collecting fingerprints and cutting her nails for evidence, police decided to ask again about these wounds. This time, her answer was completely different. Jennifer claimed the marks on her face were from insects on the bed biting her. When investigators showed doubt, because how could insects create such long and deep wounds? She just shrugged indifferently. That's what I said. If you don't know, then whatever. Through the fingerprint scanning system, the police database displayed an unexpected name, Kimberly Kessler. Why unexpected? Because this Kimberly in the police station system showed as a missing person. Kimberly's mother had reported to police in 2012 that 8 years earlier, in 2004, 35-year-old Kimberly had gone missing. At that time, before leaving, Kimberly had told her mother she was trying to avoid an abusive husband. To avoid being discovered by him, Kimberly couldn't contact her family. But she had been gone like this for 8 years, never contacting her family. As for why Kimberly's mother only reported to police 8 years after her daughter went missing, this question would have to be asked of the mother herself. Kimberly's mother, Connie Kessler, gave birth to Kimberly on May 9, 1968. In the following years, Kimberly gained a younger sister and brother. As the eldest child, Kimberly was no different from other children. But by high school, she not only became increasingly rebellious, but also had a hot temper, even violent tendencies. Not only did no classmates at school dare to provoke her, even her own brother would not be spared if he accidentally angered her. Kimberly's level of violence had exceeded the boundaries of ordinary arguments. In one conflict with her brother Bob, she waited until he was sound asleep, then took a baseball bat to attack him, hitting him directly in the face with such force that it broke and knocked out many teeth. After graduating high school, Kimberly moved in with her boyfriend Tim Bunnies. According to Tim's account, the image of Kimberly became even more frightening. She was not only violent, but also had bizarre, incomprehensible behaviors. One particularly chilling detail was Kimberly's hobby when visiting cemeteries. During a trip to commemorate her father, instead of focusing on the original purpose, she was attracted to other graves. Kimberly had the habit of searching for headstones of women, especially paying attention to those who died young and carefully recording their names and ages. It was at this cemetery that she collected the name Jennifer Sebert, the 13-year-old girl she would later use as a false identity. The relationship with Tim also proved Kimberly's violent nature. In one argument, she not only stabbed Tim with a knife, but also attacked his father. When leaving as a final act of revenge, Kimberly shot and killed the little cat that Tim loved. What was surprising was that despite her violent and unpredictable nature, Kimberly never lacked romantic relationships. Perhaps her dangerous allure attracted men willing to face risks for love. Zaylen Lucy was a typical example of such courage. He not only married Kimberly once, but returned to her a second time. Perhaps this truly was the definition of love, despite everything. More interestingly, when sharing with police, Zaylen revealed that throughout their marriage, he only knew his wife by the name Melissa, completely unaware of her true identity. In 1996, Kimberly began a new relationship with Tim Edwards and gave birth to her first son. Once again, she changed her identity, this time calling herself Miranda. However, motherhood didn't seem to suit Kimberly's nature. Instead of enjoying the happiness of being a mother, her life became a constant chain of arguments with Tim about child custody rights. The legal battle lasted 3 years and ended with the court awarding custody to Tim Edwards. Kimberly's reaction to this verdict revealed her darkest side. In a fit of rage, she stormed into the child welfare office with a gun in hand, determined to take back her son by any means necessary. Fortunately, this insane plot failed. The incident at the child welfare office marked a turning point in Kimberly's life. From a woman with psychological problems, she officially became a wanted criminal. And as if finding her true calling, Kimberly began a life with extraordinary talent for creating false identities. For 22 years, from 1996 to 2018, she lived like a ghost, moving across America. The FBI later compiled staggering numbers, at least 17 different aliases, 33 cities, 14 states. Whenever she felt at risk of being discovered, Kimberly would reborn with a completely new identity. In April 2018, just 1 month before being arrested in the Jolene case, Kimberly had performed an action typical of her impulsive nature. Under the alias Ravenstone, she met David through social media. After a few brief online conversations, Kimberly suddenly decided to meet in person. Not an ordinary date. Kimberly had driven 15.5 hours from Florida to Texas just to meet a stranger she knew through the internet. This action made David feel concerned about her judgment. But what was even more shocking happened during their first lunch. Right after finishing eating, Kimberly straightforwardly proposed marriage to David, someone she was meeting for the first time in her life. Fortunately for David, his self-preservation instincts saved him from a decision that could have changed his life. "I knew right away something wasn't right with her," David later shared. "I was so lucky I refused." Back in the interrogation room, while Kimberly sat comfortably, another investigative team had made an important discovery. They had found Jolene's missing Ford SUV at a Home Depot parking lot. Security camera footage revealed a crucial detail. At 1:17 a.m. on May 13th, Jolene's car had actually appeared there. But the person driving the car wasn't Jolene. A woman dressed all in black with a completely different build and way of moving from the victim. Instead, she had characteristics quite similar to Kimberly. Investigators quickly expanded their scope, retrieving all security cameras in the area. This effort was rewarded at a nearby gas station. They found much clearer images of the woman in black. There was no longer any doubt. It was Kimberly. The camera had clearly recorded her face with the wounds she had tried to explain evasively in the interrogation room. The gas station employee provided additional important information. Kimberly had bought a bottle of water and paid with a credit card. The cardholder's name, Jolene Rebecca Cummings. Not stopping there, she also borrowed a phone to call a taxi, and once again used Jolene's card to pay. With the real identity confirmed and a series of video evidence in hand, investigators felt the case was gradually coming to light. However, what was most notable perhaps Kimberly's attitude. She still maintained a suspiciously calm demeanor, as if participating in everyday conversation instead of being interrogated about murder. Finally, it was time for investigators to confront her directly about her true identity. "What should I call you?" an investigator asked. "When we ran your fingerprints through the system, the result that came up was Kimberly Kessler. So I'd like to be called Kim." "Fingerprints can't lie," Kimberly replied with an almost cheerful tone. "I didn't use acid to erase them, so they're still intact." When questions turned to Jolene, Kimberly's comfort remained unchanged. "When you worked with her that Saturday, did she say anything about her boyfriend? Did she mention anyone she was afraid of?" "I know she had a husband and a boyfriend," Kimberly replied casually. As investigators posed more and more questions revolving around Jolene's disappearance, Kimberly's expression had subtle changes. The investigators stated that other salon employees testified that Jolene had argued with Kimberly because Kimberly had repeatedly eavesdropped on Jolene's conversations, which made Jolene very uncomfortable. And coincidentally, the last person to see Jolene was Kimberly. As the investigation went deeper, the picture of Kimberly became systematically horrifying. Examination of her electronic devices revealed a terrifying truth. This wasn't a crime of impulse, but the result of a carefully planned and prepared scheme. The first evidence showing Kimberly's calculation was photos of Jolene's work schedule in April. She had carefully studied the victim's timetable, knowing exactly when Jolene was present at the salon and when she wasn't. On April 30th, just 12 days before the tragedy, the search history on Kimberly's device revealed dark intentions. She had looked up phrases like "coworker kills coworker," "dogs search for missing persons," "no body, no evidence," and "women killing people in Florida." This was clearly not random curiosity, but research into criminal methods. Inside Kimberly's black gear, police found high boots and professional haircutting scissors, both stained with Jolene's blood. These items not only proved Kimberly was present at the scene, but also showed she had used professional tools to commit the crime. In Kimberly's personal storage unit, police found 5 fake license plates for wigs, 3 different cell phones, all tools to maintain her secret life. Most astonishing was a phone that had searched for the name Jolene 457 times in just 48 hours, along with terrifying keywords about dismemberment, body preservation, and autopsy. This evidence painted a picture of an organized killer who not only planned to kill Jolene, but also carefully prepared for handling the aftermath. Outside the storage unit, in a forgotten blue plastic container, investigators discovered a piece of Jolene's fingernail. Nearby, under a tree canopy, 2 black shoes lay scattered with dried blood stains. Later confirmed through testing to belong to the victim, however, the most important discovery came from the workplace itself, Tangle's salon. When collecting blood samples throughout the shop, DNA results revealed a terrifying truth. This was blood from both Jolene and Kimberly. This, combined with the wounds on Kimberly, showed that the two had gone through a life and death battle here. To confirm suspicions, police used luminol reagent for testing, and the results made everyone startled. From the floor walls to cleaning tools, everything was stained with blood, showing the horrific level of violence that had occurred here. Based on this evidence, police reconstructed the chain of events. After work hours on May 12th, Kimberly and Jolene had their final confrontation at the empty salon. After killing Jolene, Kimberly changed into black clothes, drove the victim's car to Home Depot to create an alibi. She used Jolene's credit card to buy water at a gas station, called a taxi to return, then spent the entire night cleaning up the bloody crime scene. By morning, everything had been handled cleanly. Security cameras from nearby Walmart showed that early Sunday morning on the 13th, Kimberly had come to the supermarket to shop. Through retrieving Walmart's purchase records, police learned Kimberly had bought a total of 4 items: an electric kitchen knife, extra-large garbage bags, gloves, and bleach. After preparing everything, Kimberly returned to Tangle's salon. On Sunday, the shop was closed and no one was around, ideal conditions for the gruesome work she needed to do. In the quiet space of the salon, Kimberly had used the electric knife to perform the most barbaric act, dismembering Jolene into small pieces for easy transport and concealment. Surveillance cameras behind the salon showed that around 8 a.m. and 11 a.m., Kimberly appeared with white garbage bags that seemed very heavy. The way she struggled to drag these bags showed the considerable weight inside. Realizing the importance of these garbage bags, the FBI and local police launched one of the largest searches in history. Over 200 people were mobilized to the local waste processing center, where garbage bags from the salon area could have been taken. The search lasted an entire week at intense pace. Investigators sifted through 3,750 tons of waste to find pieces of Jolene's body. However, despite their best efforts, they could not find any trace of her. After being arrested, Kimberly continued to display her unpredictable nature, even in prison. She began a series of bizarre demands, first demanding transfer to another prison without giving clear reasons. When refused, she used the only weapon she had left, her own body. Kimberly began a hunger strike as a form of protest. This tactic proved effective after a week, when the prison decided to transfer her to another detention facility to avoid trouble. However, this victory was only temporary. Not yet adjusted to the new environment, Kimberly again wanted to be transferred to a mental hospital. Perhaps in her mind, that place would be more comfortable and could create grounds for future appeals. When this time she was flatly refused, she began a second hunger strike, but this time with frightening determination. This hunger strike pushed Kimberly to the dangerous edge, forcing the prison to rush her to emergency care. However, after recovering her health, she was still returned to prison instead of the mental hospital as desired. Failing to achieve her goal, Kimberly turned to even more disgusting behaviors. She deliberately neglected personal hygiene, then used waste as a kind of biological weapon, smearing it on walls, throwing it at staff and other inmates. These behaviors not only created a toxic work environment, but also caused serious psychological damage to the guards. Many of them had to undergo psychological treatment. Some even developed depression from facing daily mental torture from Kimberly. 1 year after the case, on July 2, 2019, the court held the first hearing to assess Kimberly's mental competency. 2 psychology experts concluded she was not yet fit to stand trial, and Judge James Daniel agreed to postpone the trial. In 2020, the second hearing took place with a more tense atmosphere. Kimberly had to be restrained to a special chair due to continuous cursing and disruptive behavior. This time, experts reached the opposite conclusion. She was completely lucid and fully understood her actions. Prison guards testified that Kimberly always knew what she was doing, just deliberately causing difficulties. Judge James Daniel made a harsh assessment. Kimberly is not mentally ill. She's just a cunning, scheming person who doesn't want anyone else to have peace. Finally, the court decided Kimberly was competent to stand trial and would be transferred to Florida Women's Prison to await the official trial. In November 2021, after 3.5 years of waiting, Kimberly's official trial finally began. As soon as she appeared, she began screaming frantically even before the judge opened the session. Judge James, already accustomed to these theatrical displays, immediately ordered her removed. Without Kimberly's disruptive presence, the trial proceeded smoothly. Defense attorneys made their final argument. No body means no certainty that Jolene was dead, so Kimberly couldn't be convicted of murder. However, the jury disagreed. On December 9, 2021, they declared Kimberly guilty of first-degree murder. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Story 2. In the quiet apartments of Mumbai, India, where life unfolds as ordinarily as any other day, few could imagine that behind the meals of a happy family lay a dark conspiracy when 65-year-old Sarla Devi suddenly passed away after severe stomach pains. Everyone assumed it was simply the natural passing of old age, but just 10 days later, her son Kamal Khan Shah mysteriously began experiencing similar symptoms. What had really happened in this family? The answer will shock you with the level of cruelty humans can reach when driven by greed and forbidden love. In the Ganesh Krupa apartment complex located in the suburban area of Santa Cruz in bustling Mumbai, the Shah family was enjoying peaceful days. Kamal Khan Shah, a successful businessman in the garment industry, had built a comfortable life with his wife Kyle, 2 teenage children, and his 65-year-old mother, Sarla Devi. Their apartment often echoed with laughter when Kamal Khan's 3 sisters visited, creating the picture of a happy family that everyone envied. Everything seemed perfect, but behind this peaceful exterior, underlying tensions were quietly brewing. However, this happiness was like morning mist, quickly dissipating when on July 29, 2022, Sarla Devi suddenly fell into excruciating stomach pain, severe vomiting, and the 65-year-old's agonizing groans threw the entire family into panic. The condition was so serious that they had to rush her to the hospital in the middle of the night. At the hospital, the medical team tried their best to find clues about this mysterious illness. From basic blood tests to specialized examinations, every effort was made. However, each result only left them more confused. All indicators were within normal limits, but Sarla Devi's condition continued to deteriorate inexplicably. After 14 days of fighting this terrible disease, Sarla Devi breathed her last on August 13, 2022. This sudden death struck like lightning from a clear sky, instantly transforming the Shaw family from perfect happiness into profound grief. The death certificate was issued with cold medical terminology. Multiple organ failure due to severe influenza, pneumonia, left ventricular dysfunction, and hypothyroidism all seemed reasonable for an elderly woman with poor health. At the funeral, Kamal Khan stood before the cremation fire, his face weathered by grief, but still trying to contain himself to fulfill his final duty as a son. Life gradually returned to normal after the days of mourning and sorrow. However, cruel fate had not yet released the Shah family. Just 11 days after his mother's death, on August 24, 2022, Kamal Khan suddenly woke up with severe stomach pain. Continuous vomiting left him exhausted, but he simply thought it was because he had eaten outside food the day before that wasn't fresh. With the mindset of a strong man, Kamal Khan decided to handle the situation himself. He tried to self-treat with some folk remedies, but instead of improving, the pain only intensified. When he finally had to surrender and seek help from a local doctor, Kamal Khan still believed this was just ordinary stomach pain. The doctor examined him briefly, prescribed some medications, and reassured him that taking the medicine properly would cure him. But those pills seemed to disappear into the void, not only ineffective, but making his condition even more horrific. Now Kamal Khan's entire body felt tortured by an invisible force. Pain spread through every joint, every muscle fiber, even more terrifying. Each morning he woke up to find his pillow covered with fallen hair. Kamal Khan's condition first worsened on August 24th. By August 27th, seeing his pale face and emaciated body, even the local doctor couldn't hide his concern and advised him to go to a major hospital immediately, because these symptoms were not normal at all. Creek Care Hospital in Ontario, only 2 miles from home, but for Kamal Khan, at this point, that distance felt like a torturous journey. When wheeled into the emergency room, he was completely exhausted, only having enough strength to whisper about the horrific pain he was enduring. In the hospital corridor, Kyle and Kamal Khan's 3 sisters sat waiting in extreme anxiety. The shadow of death still haunted their family. Just over 2 weeks ago, in this very corridor, they had waited for news about Sarla Devi. Now was history cruelly repeating itself. At Creek Care, the medical team was doing everything possible to find the disease tormenting Kamal Khan. However, the results once again left the doctors desperately confused. All indicators were within normal limits, but the patient was dying before their eyes. They decided to transfer Kamal Khan to Bombay Hospital. Treatment for him began at Bombay Hospital, where blood tests were performed. But results showed nothing abnormal. The doctors there, despite being at one of the top 10 hospitals in Mumbai, also couldn't explain the cause of Kamal Khan's condition. His condition was deteriorating daily, with each passing minute bringing unbearable pain. Nevertheless, the doctors at Bombay Hospital had to treat him based on educated guesses. Fortunately, after just a few days, Kamal Khan's condition gradually improved, surprising everyone. He was discharged with assurance that he had recovered and could return home. However, that joy lasted only 2 days. Kamal Khan fell into pain again, this time even more severe than before. His family once again rushed him back to the hospital. After admission, doctors continued treatment and gave him medication, and he felt better again. His condition stabilized when in the hospital, but as soon as he returned home, the illness relapsed and became more serious. However, one strange thing gradually became clear. Kamal Khan only stabilized when in the hospital, but as soon as he went home, the illness relapsed and became more serious. This pattern began to catch the attention of doctors at Bombay Hospital. This time, they discovered another abnormal detail. Since being hospitalized, Kamal Khan's hair and beard had completely stopped growing. The family also noticed this change, and the combination of these strange symptoms made doctors begin to suspect. They decided to conduct heavy metal testing on Kamal Khan. The test was performed, and now all that remained was waiting for the results. On September 13th, the heavy metal test report was ready. When reading the results, the doctors were shocked. In Kamal Khan's body, they found 2 chemical elements, arsenic and thallium. Thallium is an extremely toxic metal, once used in rat poison years ago, while arsenic is a natural poison causing death. Just a small amount of thallium in the stomach can cause hair loss, paralysis of body parts, and severe stomach pain. Meanwhile, Ingesting arsenic can lead to severe vomiting. Both chemical elements are colorless, odorless, and tasteless, making them very difficult to detect. And even more suspicious was that both metals were present in Kamal Khan's body at levels hundreds of times higher than normal. Seeing the test results, doctors at Bombay Hospital immediately called the police, as they realized this was not an ordinary medical condition. Police from Azad Maidan station quickly arrived at the hospital and were informed by doctors that Kamal Khan had dangerously high levels of arsenic and thallium in his body. This meant that someone had definitely given Kamal Khan these poisons to drink or eat. Police understood that arsenic and thallium were both deadly poisons, acting slowly in the body. However, before police could begin investigation, Kamal Khan passed away on the evening of September 19, 2022. At 10:40 p.m. doctors informed the family and police of this news. The entire family was in a state of shock. Since his father's death, Kamal Khan had been the family's pillar, caring for his wife and 2 children. Now with his passing, his wife couldn't stop crying, the pain too great for her to contain her emotions. Due to Kamal Khan's death under suspicious circumstances, police wanted to conduct an autopsy and file a complaint. But surprisingly, Kamal Khan's wife Kyle opposed the police decision and said she didn't want any dissection of her husband's body. However, under pressure from Kamal Khan's sisters, Kyle agreed to the autopsy, and the report revealed that Kamal Khan died from multiple organ failure caused by arsenic and thallium consumption. Police officially opened an investigation file into Kamal Khan's death and transferred the case to Santa Cruz Police Station. Police there took the matter very seriously, because they knew that the heavy metal chemicals found in Kamal Khan's body couldn't be purchased at any pharmacy, laboratory, or clinic. The truth is that arsenic and thallium are completely banned from sale to ordinary citizens in India. Only companies are allowed to buy and sell to each other, and even then, extensive paperwork is required. Companies must get government permission, have special licenses, and write letters clearly explaining how much chemical they need and what it will be used for. This made police raise important questions. How could someone obtain these dangerous poisons, and how did they use them to kill someone? Concerned that Kamal Khan's entire family might be targeted, doctors and police required all family members to undergo heavy metal testing. Kamal Khan's 3 sisters immediately agreed, but Kyle refused. After much persuasion, Kyle finally agreed to be tested. Results on September 23, 2022 showed a small amount of thallium in her blood, but very little. After taking detoxification medication, Kyle completely recovered. However, Kamal Khan's 3 sisters told police important information. Their mother, Sarla Devi, had died in August. Before her death, she had symptoms identical to Kamal Khan's: severe stomach pain and continuous vomiting. Hearing this information, police began to suspect whether Sarla Devi's death was also murder. The similar signs between her death and Kamal Khan's made the investigation increasingly complex. When the case became increasingly complex with many new leads, Santa Cruz Police decided to transfer the file to Mumbai Crime Branch, Unit 9. This unit specializes in serious criminal cases with better experience and equipment to handle such complex matters. The crime branch began work by collecting all documents, Kamal Khan's medical reports, family member statements, and beginning professional investigation using their methods. The investigation team conducted interviews with many people, colleagues at Kamal Khan's company, close friends, and family relatives. During this process, Kamal Khan's 3 sisters shared very surprising information with police, things they had never spoken about before. According to Kamal Khan's 3 sisters, his marriage had been troubled for about 2 years. The couple frequently argued, and Kyle was not only angry with her husband, but also didn't get along with her Maderna, Sarla Devi. The situation became tense in May 2021, when Kyle decided to leave her husband's house, taking her daughter to live with her parents. She stayed there for 4 to 5 months. In October 2021, Kyle returned to Mumbai but didn't return to her husband's house, instead renting a separate room in Valparo. Not only that, she also went to the old house to take all expensive jewelry and important personal belongings and brought them to her rented place. Seeing this, both families tried to mediate. They continuously persuaded Kyle, asking what made her so angry and hoping she would return to live with her husband as before, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Kamal Khan himself very much wanted his wife to return. He hoped Kyle could overlook past disagreements so the family could be reunited and happy again, after months of pleading and persuasion from both families. Finally, in May 2022, Kyle agreed to live with her husband. However, she set 3 conditions. First, she would sleep separately, not sharing a room with Kamal Khan. Second, she demanded complete freedom. To go anywhere, talk to anyone, and no one in the family could interfere or ask questions. Third, to have money for personal expenses. She demanded Kamal Khan give her 200,000 rupees, $2,400 each month. These conditions made the family situation even more tense, even though the couple had agreed to reconcile. Despite these harsh conditions, Kamal Khan accepted everything so his wife could return. In June 2022, Kyle officially returned to live with her husband's family. Initially, Kyle lived exactly as she had outlined. She only cooked for herself and her daughter, not caring about other family members. She even argued with her mother-in-law, Sarla Devi. The atmosphere in the house was so tense that everyone thought the situation would never improve. However, something strange happened. According to Kamal Khan's 3 sisters, after just a few days, Kyle's attitude suddenly changed completely. She began treating her husband gently, speaking politely to her mother-in-law, and voluntarily took on cooking for the entire family. She even did more housework, relying less on the maid. This change surprised everyone, and they began hoping that family life would gradually improve. In the Shah family, there used to be a maid who specialized in bringing warm milk and drinks to Sarla Devi regularly throughout the day. However, Nakul had personally taken over this job. This was precisely when Kamal Khan's 3 sisters began to become suspicious. They noticed that their brother and mother's health only began deteriorating after Kyle completely took control of cooking and carrying in the house. Hearing this information, police also began suspecting Kyle more. They decided to investigate her background and daily activities more thoroughly. When checking the call list on Kyle's phone, police discovered a number she called very frequently, multiple times a day. This number was saved as Hitesh Jain. Interestingly, the same number also appeared in Kamal Khan's contact list. This coincidence made police even more suspicious, and they decided to investigate further to find the connection between Kyle and Hitesh. Hitesh Jain, the crime branch team, immediately asked Kamal Khan's 3 sisters about Hitesh Jain. They said Hitesh was Kamal Khan's childhood friend. The two had studied together from high school through college, and Hitesh also worked in the garment industry like Kamal Khan. Hitesh cherished Kamal Khan like a brother, so he frequently visited the family. Hearing this information, it seemed finding Hitesh's phone number in both Kamal Khan and his wife's phones was normal. Anyone might think the police shouldn't be suspicious. However, what caught police attention was that Kyle not only had Hitesh's phone number, but also texted on WhatsApp and called him very frequently. The question arose, why would a married woman contact a friend of her husband's so much? What did they talk about that required such frequent communication? To find answers to these questions, on December 1st, 2022, Mumbai Crime Branch arrested Kyle and began interrogating her. Although police couldn't locate Hitesh at the time, they still used all resources to track him down. Meanwhile, police interrogated Kyle strictly and finally, she collapsed under pressure and revealed a shocking story. Actually, when Kamal Khan was only 10 years old, his father had passed away, and at that time, all 3 of his sisters were also very young. A few years after their father's death, Kamal Khan began becoming the family's pillar. He studied while working to earn money for his 3 sisters to continue their education. Later, Kamal Khan started a clothing business. Thanks to his diligence, the business grew daily. Later, in 2002, Kamal Khan married Kyle, daughter of a famous businessman in Gujarat, India. The couple then had 2 children, and at the time of Kamal Khan's death, their daughter was 20 and their son was 17. Kyle continued, telling police that Hitesh frequently came to the house because he was Kamal Khan's best friend. Due to frequent contact, Kyle and Hitesh began chatting and joking with each other naturally. Initially, Hitesh still considered Kyle as his son-in-law, and everything was just normal conversations between family relatives. However, when Kyle began having disagreements with her husband, she turned to Hitesh to confide, sharing difficulties in her marriage. Gradually, Hitesh became a confidant with whom Kyle could share all her joys and sorrows. During this process, Hitesh began developing feelings for Kyle, the wife of his best friend. The two increasingly contacted each other more, calling and texting whenever possible. The initial friendship gradually turned into a complex romantic relationship, causing Kyle to sink deeper into an uncontrollable spiral. Around 2020, Kamal Khan discovered the between his wife and friend when he caught them being intimate together. After this incident, marital conflicts became more intense than ever. However, Kamal Khan didn't make a fuss about this because he cared greatly about his reputation and didn't want to tarnish the family image. Nevertheless, Kyle lived in extreme fear, constantly worrying that her husband might take some action against her at any time. Feelings of insecurity and tension increasingly grew in her, making their relationship irreparable. Although Kyle could have divorced Kamal Khan at this point, and he wouldn't have objected, she also realized that if she filed for divorce herself, she wouldn't receive a penny in alimony. Moreover, Kamal Khan now owned valuable assets and insurance contracts. He had even made himself, his mother Sarla Devi, and his wife Kyle stakeholders in his company. All these factors made Kyle not only feel attached, but also very worried about her future if divorced. Kyle discussed all this with her boyfriend H, and finally, the two decided they would commit murder. Not just one person, but two. In fact, some assets that Kamal Khan had acquired were under his mother, Sarla Devi's name. Additionally, Sarla Devi also had a large life insurance contract under her name and owned a significant portion of Kamal Khan's company. That's why Kyle realized that if she only killed Kamal Khan, her mother-in-law Sarla Devi would become a major obstacle later when she could claim assets and interests related to the company. Therefore, Kyle and H planned to kill both Kamal Khan and Sarla Devi. They understood that if they wanted everything to go smoothly, they needed to kill both in a way that their deaths wouldn't be suspected, appearing to be accidents or natural events. So H turned to the internet to find ways to execute this plan perfectly. They planned in detail, hoping everything would proceed without leaving traces and no one could suspect these deaths. Meanwhile, Kyle, angry with her husband, decided to return to her parents' house. Here, she openly continued talking with H all day, as no one was around to stop her. During this time, also found ways to commit murder through the internet, and informed Kyle that they would kill her husband and mother-in-law using arsenic and thallium to deadly chemical elements. H explained that these two substances weren't easily detected in routine blood tests. Moreover, consuming them didn't cause immediate death, so no one would suspect Kamal Khan and Sarla Devi's deaths. However, since these substances were banned in India, H devised a way to obtain them easily. H created a fake company and contacted a legitimate company, telling them they needed some chemical elements to manufacture low-temperature thermometers. He explained that these elements were only needed for testing purposes and intended to have a larger business plan in the future. Hearing all these explanations, the company didn't ask too many questions and sent H a small amount of thallium, arsenic, and a few other chemical elements via express delivery. With the poisons in hand, the most difficult part of the plan began. Kyle needed to find a way to give them to Kamal Khan and her mother-in-law without being detected. To accomplish this, Kyle deliberately left her parents' house, returned to Mumbai, and rented a separate apartment. H came here to give her the arsenic and thallium he had purchased. From now on, Kyle had to complete the rest of the plan alone. She decided to move back to her husband's house with her daughter. When she returned home, Kyle began completely changing her attitude. She volunteered to take on jobs that the maid had previously done, like bringing milk, food, and drinks to Sarla Devi. She also personally prepared and served food to her husband. This was precisely when Kyle began executing the murder plan. She gradually mixed arsenic and thallium into the food and drinks of both people, but was very careful not to put any in food portions her child might eat. Since Sarla Devi was elderly, in poor health, and had been sick many times before, the poison affected her faster. That's why she died before Kamal Khan, after these two abnormal deaths. When police required all family members to undergo heavy metal testing, initially refused, but 10 days later, she suddenly agreed. Kyle confessed that the reason she agreed to testing was to create an alibi for herself. Before going for the test, she had deliberately consumed a very small amount of thallium and arsenic. This way, when results showed a bit of poison in her blood, she could say she was also a victim. Just lucky to escape death. After hearing Kyle's confession, police began hunting for Hitesh and finally caught him. They checked search history on Hitesh's phone and computer. The evidence was very clear. Recently, Hitesh had searched for the keyword arsenic 105 times and thallium 156 times on the internet. Additionally, from WhatsApp messages between Kyle and Hitesh, police discovered that Kyle had once intended to give her husband more poison when he was hospitalized but couldn't execute it. Police also collected security camera footage from the rental house, where Kyle had lived with her daughter. In these videos, they clearly saw Hitesh visiting Kyle multiple times, proving the secret relationship between the two. At this point, police had sufficient evidence. The motive for murder, money, and love affair. The method of execution, poisoning with arsenic and thallium, along with confessions from both suspects. On February 27, 2023, police officially filed charges in court, detailing all charges. The trial began with presentation of extensive evidence and witness testimony before the judge. However, in May 2024, filed for bail in trial court. At this time, the judge refused her bail due to the serious nature of the charges Kyle and Hitesh had committed. But in September 2024, when Kyle applied for bail once again, this time she succeeded. On September 18th, the trial court decided to grant Kyle bail for two main reasons: lack of direct evidence and concerns about caring for her minor children. The truth is that police only had indirect evidence, such as internet search history, WhatsApp messages, and confessions. They didn't find any poison in Kyle's house, nor did anyone directly witness her putting poison in food. Kyle exploited this weakness, asserting to the court that she was being falsely accused. She said police had no specific evidence proving she actually poisoned anyone. In the bail hearing, the prosecution couldn't present sufficiently strong evidence. As a result, Kyle Shah is currently free, living like a normal person. Meanwhile, Hitesh Jain is still detained and hasn't been granted bail, even after appealing to the Bombay High Court. Notably, although there were actually two deaths, the official record only acknowledges one murder, that of Kamal Khan. Sarla Devi's death isn't considered murder because police don't have enough evidence to prove this. The reason Sarla Devi's death couldn't be proven as murder is that her body was cremated immediately after death. At that time, no one suspected anything, so no heavy metal testing was performed. When police wanted to investigate, it was too late. Therefore, it still cannot be definitively confirmed whether Sarla Devi died naturally or was poisoned like her son. This leaves a major question mark in the case. Currently, the case is still being tried in court. Final sentencing for Kyle and Hitesh has not yet occurred. The legal battle between prosecutors and defense attorneys continues. While complete justice for the Shah family remains unsolved, the Shah family murder case has concluded, leaving many painful lessons about human cruelty when driven by greed and forbidden love. From a happy family in Mumbai, within just a few months, 2 lives were brutally taken by their own family member. Story 3. Before we get to that tragic night, it's important to understand who Stephen Freeman was. The man who once called that house home. Born on January 1st, 1995 in Thomasville County, Stephen's early years were shaped by financial hardship. Just a few years later, his family relocated to Griffin City in search of better opportunities. There, Stephen grew up in a warm and loving environment. In that very household, his parents were deeply committed to giving Stephen and his older brother the best foundation possible. Every effort was made to ensure the boys had not just what they needed materially, but also emotionally and spiritually. The results of that upbringing quickly became clear in Stephen's personality. His childhood was filled with happiness, and people naturally gravitated toward him. He was cheerful, optimistic, and always smiling. No matter the situation, Stephen could find a reason to be hopeful. Behind his joyful demeanor was a rich inner world nurtured by family love, especially the bond he shared with his mother. When she made the decision to return to school and pursue higher education, Stephen was incredibly proud. Her determination inspired him deeply. On the day she received her diploma, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing how proud he was, thanking her for everything she had done for him and his brother. Not long after, another meaningful relationship began to take shape in Stephen's life. While in high school, he met Mary Catherine Higdon, a classmate 1 year his senior. They quickly grew close, bonding over shared interests and a love for the outdoors. Mary Catherine enjoyed camping, and she often joined Stephen and his tight-knit group of friends on overnight trips into the woods. Her connection with the group wasn't just because of shared hobbies. Her bold personality and openness played a big part. She wasn't intimidated by rough terrain or firearms, and her comfort in those settings made her stand out. Stephen's friends took to her quickly, recognizing how her presence brought out a happier version of him. Before long, she became a regular fixture at every group gathering, but their connection wasn't limited to weekend trips. The closeness between Stephen and Mary Catherine was also rooted in similar upbringings. Mary Catherine came from a loving home, and was known for singing and dancing during family gatherings from a young age. Energetic, creative, and with a deep affection for both nature and animals, she made a strong impression, especially on Stephen. As they entered adulthood, the couple began building a life together beyond the comfort of their families. After graduating high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine moved in together. Stephen worked for a roofing repair company, while Mary Catherine became a teaching assistant at a local preschool. Over time, their relationship matured, just as they did. By 2018, Stephen was 23 and Mary Catherine was 24. They had been together for 7 years, long enough to experience the full range of emotions that come with a long-term relationship. Like many couples, they sometimes faced disagreements. At times, arguments escalated into serious conflicts, even leading to a brief breakup. But even during the moments they were apart, they always found their way back to each other, as if nothing had ever broken. After every rough patch, their desire to stay together became even stronger. Their bond gradually gained full acceptance from both families. Mary Catherine often spent Sundays at Stephen's home, joining in on family dinners. That closeness extended to the deeper family connections. Stephen's mother was especially fond of Mary Catherine, treating her like a daughter. During the holidays, both families would come together as one. Of all the celebrations, Christmas was always the most special, held in the warmth of the house on Sunnybrook Drive, but not every holiday gathering brought peace. It was in that very familiar home that, on the night of August 1st, 2018, everything changed. Around 11 p.m., the sound of sirens pierced the quiet street, red and blue lights flashing across the windows. An ambulance and patrol car pulled up silently in front of 1470 Sunnybrook Drive. What had prompted such an urgent response became clear moments later. Emergency dispatch had received several frantic calls from a woman named Mary Catherine. Her voice broke through sobs as she struggled to explain what had happened inside the home. They had shared for years. Between gasps and tears, Mary Catherine said she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. Still crying, she described a chaotic scene and insisted she had only been trying to hand Stephen a gun. As she passed it over, it unexpectedly went off. She claimed she had no idea the gun had been loaded. By the time first responders arrived, they found Stephen lying motionless on a mattress in the middle of the living room. Mary Catherine was kneeling beside him, emotionally overwhelmed, sobbing uncontrollably and calling out his name. When officers tried to move her aside to allow paramedic space to help Stephen, Mary Catherine resisted. She refused to leave his side, pushing them away and screaming that she couldn't lose him. Eventually, after multiple attempts to calm her, emergency personnel were able to reach Stephen. Though his condition was critical and his pulse was faint, he was still responsive. The medical team immediately rushed him to the hospital. Only after he was safely transported were officers able to sit down and begin speaking with Mary Catherine. Even then, communication was difficult. Mary Catherine remained hysterical, frequently breaking into tears and struggling to speak. She could only repeat what she had already told dispatch, that the shooting was accidental and that she never meant for any of it to happen, according to her continued account. Mary Catherine insisted that she hadn't even pointed the gun at Stephen, but it went off unexpectedly. The bullet struck his upper chest, causing severe trauma near the neck. Although paramedics tried to stop the bleeding on site, the blood loss was too extensive. Stephen was pronounced dead at the hospital just before midnight. While Mary Catherine remained in a state of emotional shock, investigators at the scene began to notice inconsistencies in her story. Certain physical clues suggested that something else may have occurred before the gunshot. At the same time, the kitchen area painted a chaotic picture. Food had been spilled across the countertops and scattered on the tile floor. Several chairs were knocked out of place, and various items had fallen off shelves, lying in disarray. It appeared that a heated argument, possibly involving physical aggression, had taken place before the shooting. As investigators examined the scene more closely, they also noticed a strong smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. Still overwhelmed by emotion, she spoke in broken sentences with little coherence. Given the circumstances, officers decided to escort her to the station for further questioning. She didn't resist and quietly left the scene with them. In the interrogation room, Mary Catherine repeated her claim that the entire incident had been a tragic accident. She stated that she had never planned or intended to hurt Stephen in any way. He had been the closest person in her life for years, and as she said, there was no reason for her to ever harm him intentionally. To support her explanation, She told investigators that guns and hunting had long been shared interests between the two of them. According to her, they had collected several firearms together, but always kept them on safety mode and never loaded them in advance. Mary Catherine firmly stated she was genuinely shocked to discover that the gun had fired at all. However, as the interrogation progressed, her description of the moment the gun discharged began to shift. Mary Catherine now said that, while handing the gun to Stephen with a tossing motion, the trigger was somehow activated and the bullet fired. This new detail did not go unnoticed. Her revised account conflicted with what she initially told police at the scene, where she had claimed she was simply passing the gun to Stephen in a normal way. Now she was saying she had tossed a loaded weapon in his direction. This inconsistency forced investigators to re-examine the entire context of the case. They realized that Mary Catherine was no stranger to firearms. In addition to working at a local preschool, she also had a second job at a nearby gun store. What's more, Mary Catherine wasn't just familiar with guns, she had received formal training. According to her, her knowledge of firearms even surpassed Stephen's. As an employee in a firearms retail environment, she was required to fully understand all safety regulations regarding the handling and storage of weapons. Because of this, investigators, many of whom had spent years being trained in firearm safety, found Mary Catherine's explanation increasingly difficult to accept. For someone who had undergone formal training and worked at a gun store, tossing a loaded firearm wasn't just reckless, it was knowingly endangering herself and the person across from her. To them, this wasn't a panicked reflex. It was a direct violation of fundamental safety protocols that every firearm user is expected to follow. Based on this assessment, the investigators decided to change tactics. One of them confronted Mary Catherine directly, stating clearly that they didn't believe her version of events. She was accused of being dishonest, and the inconsistencies were laid out one by one. The chaos in the kitchen, the smell of alcohol on her breath, and the conflicting statements she had given earlier, the pressure quickly took its toll. As the tone of the questioning became more intense, Mary Catherine broke down in tears. According to the investigators, it was in this emotional moment that she admitted she had pulled the trigger out of anger. Ironically, just as she made this confession, a technical failure occurred in the interrogation room. While the video continued to record, the audio system malfunctioned. As a result, everything Mary Catherine said, including her admission that she had fired the gun, was not captured on tape. Investigators were visibly frustrated, knowing that one of the most critical pieces of evidence would be inadmissible in court. Still, the investigation pressed forward. Mary Catherine was arrested and later formally charged with murder. Prosecutors believed there was enough evidence to proceed with the case. In addition to physical evidence and a clear motive, the prosecution focused heavily on the contradictions in her statements. From this, investigators argued that Mary Catherine was fully aware of what she was doing when she used the firearm. She had experience handling weapons at her workplace and often spoke knowledgeably about them. To them, her actions that night didn't reflect a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a deliberate decision. Even the gun itself raised suspicion. Its oiled interior suggested it had been prepared in advance, not simply left lying around as part of a tragic accident. Further fueling their theory was the effort she had put into preparing dinner that evening. She had cooked grilled beef, Stephen's favorite dish, as a gesture of affection. But just minutes later, everything spiraled out of control. Food ended up scattered across the kitchen, a gunshot rang out, and Stephen Freeman was gone forever. As the investigation widened, a dedicated team reached out to close friends and family of the couple, those who might offer insight into their relationship. All were shocked by the news of Stephen's death, and nearly every one of them voiced the same concern. They found it hard to believe this had happened, and even harder to believe Mary Catherine's version of events, especially since she was the only person present at the scene when it all happened. According to what Stephen's friends had personally heard from him, this wasn't the first time Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at her boyfriend. On multiple occasions during their relationship, she had displayed such behavior, raising increasing concern among those close to them, the volatility of their relationship. In the beginning, things between them seemed relatively calm. They went on camping trips together, raised pets, and bonded over their shared love of nature. But within just a few years, things started to unravel. Mary Catherine became increasingly prone to yelling, angered easily, and often lost her temper over minor issues. These developments left Stephen feeling suffocated. He frequently had to leave the apartment just to find a moment of peace for himself. At one point, he even tried blocking Mary Catherine's phone number, but she kept calling over and over, making it impossible for him to escape the constant pressure. And it wasn't just Stephen who said this. A co-worker of his later testified that Mary Catherine had once called Stephen around 30 times before his shift even began. More troubling still, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern that repeated almost daily. Around that same period, on April 21, 2018, 3 months before he was killed, Stephen sent a text to a friend. In it, he described Mary Catherine running around their apartment, screaming with a gun in her hand, saying she would shoot both of them. It didn't stop there. About a month later, Stephen messaged that same friend again, sharing that Mary Catherine had disengaged the safety and racked the slide of a gun right in front of him. While she had pointed weapons at him before, this time felt fundamentally different. Her eyes no longer showed mere anger or threat. What he saw made him genuinely believe she might pull the trigger. Realizing the danger had escalated beyond his control, Stephen decided to end the toxic relationship and start fresh in a different city. A close friend offered to let him stay temporarily. Stephen planned to pack up his things while Mary Catherine was at work, hoping to leave quietly without confrontation. The escape was set for August 3rd, but before he could leave, the signs of danger in their relationship had already surfaced many times. Stephen had never filed an official police report about Mary Catherine's threats. However, during the investigation, police discovered they had been called to the couple's apartment 5 times within a single year. In several of those cases, the calls were due to loud arguments and disturbances inside the home. Even so, just 2 days before the shooting, on July 30th, Stephen and Mary Catherine were still exchanging affectionate messages. They wished each other a good day and reaffirmed their love for one another. But the very next day, on July 31st, everything changed. A violent argument broke out, prompting Stephen to leave the apartment and stay temporarily at a friend's house. He cut off all contact with Mary Catherine. Every call and message from her was ignored. In a conversation with his mother, Stephen made it clear he was never going back to that place again. On the following day, August 1st, Mary Catherine made another attempt to reach Stephen. When he didn't respond, she cooked dinner herself, hoping that this ordinary gesture might bring him home. But Stephen remained silent and didn't return to the apartment. Frustrated, she called Stephen's mother to ask where he was. It was during that call that she learned he had spent the night at a friend's house, a man named Thomas. Refusing to let the situation continue in silence, Mary Catherine got in her car and went looking for him. While driving, she spotted Thomas's vehicle with Stephen sitting in the back seat. She pulled up alongside, rolled down the window, and confronted him, asking if he intended to come home. After a tense exchange, Stephen, tired and eager to avoid another confrontation, reluctantly agreed and switched into her car. What he didn't realize was that this would be the beginning of a carefully laid trap. A loaded gun awaited him back at the apartment. Hours later, Stephen Freeman was shot and pronounced dead at the hospital. That moment marked the start of a dramatic legal battle. As the trial began, prosecutors argued that Stephen's death was not an accident. It was a deliberate and cruel act. They claimed that Mary Catherine had prepared Stephen's favorite dinner in hopes of luring him home. But when he didn't show, her disappointment turned into rage. To support this claim, they presented physical evidence, grease stains on the gun, and blood stains on the bedsheet. To strengthen the case, investigators performed a detailed crime scene analysis. Stains on the corner of the bed and surrounding area indicated that Stephen may have been sitting upright when shot, then collapsed backward onto the mattress. In court, friends, relatives, and coworkers took the stand one by one. Each emphasized the instability in Stephen and Mary Catherine's relationship. Their testimony painted a consistent picture of Mary Catherine as controlling, aggressive, and deeply concerning to those around them. Adding to the case, the lead prosecutor highlighted the fact that Mary Catherine had changed her statement 6 times during the investigation. Each version differed, some minor revisions, others complete shifts in narrative. These contradictions raised serious doubts among the jury about her credibility. However, when the courtroom doors opened for Mary Catherine's next session, the story took a different turn. This time, she no longer called it an accident. She claimed her actions were done in self-defense. Her legal team quickly backed this claim by introducing a completely new version of events. According to them, Stephen Freeman, the cheerful, well-liked man described by his friends, was a very different person behind closed doors. The defense argued that Mary Catherine had been living with a controlling, jealous, and potentially violent partner. They claimed he dictated how she dressed and behaved, monitored her spending, and expected her to report every aspect of her daily life. In addition to her prior testimony, Mary Catherine accused Stephen of once hitting the back of her head and on another occasion forcefully kicking her off the bed, causing her to hit her head on a doorframe. To support these claims, her defense attorney submitted 63 pages of angry, vulgar, and threatening messages that Stephen had allegedly sent to her a year earlier. These texts were recovered from one of Mary Catherine's old phones and dated back to a brief breakup. Because of this, Mary Catherine chose to take the stand in her own defense. Through tears, she described her life with Stephen as a constant cycle of fear, stress, and exhaustion, a living hell in her words. She claimed that every morning she had to lay out his clothes and shoes in the exact arrangement he preferred. She also testified that the bathroom had to be cleaned and prepared before Stephen would use it. Mary Catherine told the court that Stephen frequently accused her of cheating, and those accusations would often escalate into volatile arguments that spiraled out of control. To reinforce this narrative, her legal team presented several text messages allegedly sent by Stephen. In one message, he threatened to come home and make her pay if she dared to bring up his personal lifestyle again. Another message warned that he would return that night because he missed her, and when he did, he would take her to what he called the Red Room. Mary Catherine explained that the Red Room was not an actual location, but rather a phrase Stephen used to describe nights when he allegedly tied her up and beat her in various rooms of the house. Sobbing, she claimed that Stephen forced her into sex twice, even after she clearly said no, yet he continued, regardless of her refusal. One of those instances, according to her, happened shortly after they returned from a trip to Disneyland. She said Stephen told her that since he had spent a lot of money on the vacation, she owed it to him to repay him by doing what he wanted, then coerced her despite her objections. Shifting to the night of the incident, Mary Catherine testified that what happened on August 1st wasn't driven by anger, but by fear that it had built up over time. That night, she told Stephen she no longer wanted to be in the relationship. His reaction, she claimed, was explosive. He threw the plate of food she had made and pushed her with his hands. At that point, Mary Catherine said she grabbed a gun and demanded he leave the apartment. When asked to describe the final moments before Stephen was shot, she stated that he charged at her and within seconds he had been hit, and was asking her to call for help. She insisted that everything happened so fast that she had no intention to hurt him, let alone kill him. However, investigators grew skeptical. Throughout her previous interrogations, Mary Catherine had never once mentioned being attacked or subjected to violence by Stephen. That omission became a major point in the prosecution's rebuttal. They emphasized that during her entire time cooperating with police, Mary Catherine had never claimed to have been assaulted. There were no medical records showing evidence of injuries, and no police reports had ever been filed to support her claims of abuse. In response to the prosecution's challenge, Mary Catherine explained that she used to believe her boyfriend's violent behavior was her own fault. She told the court that if she had behaved better, maybe Stephen wouldn't have gotten angry. As for her silence during previous police questioning, she said she had been too ashamed to reveal the truth about their relationship. However, this explanation was quickly challenged by an unexpected piece of evidence presented by the prosecution. Data from Mary Catherine's phone browser showed that just hours before the shooting, she had accessed adult websites featuring violent content. These searches were made while she was working as a babysitter. This prompted the prosecution to question whether someone who claimed to be a victim of abuse would voluntarily search for and view such content. Mary Catherine responded that the situation was being misunderstood. She claimed that her motivation for visiting those websites didn't stem from personal interest, but from a desire to satisfy Stephen's preferences. To support their argument that Mary Catherine had been abused, the defense shifted focus to highlight patterns consistent with someone living in a violent environment. One expert witness testified that her behavior matched symptoms associated with battered woman syndrome. However, prosecutors pushed back, arguing that Mary Catherine exhibited no clear psychological signs of trauma. Despite these claims, prosecutors remained skeptical of Mary Catherine's behavior on the day of the shooting, while the defense admitted she had expressed a desire to end the relationship. They also pointed out that she repeatedly attempted to contact Stephen that day. She cooked his favorite meal, and when he didn't return, drove to a friend's apartment to persuade him to come home. According to the defense, Those were actions of reconciliation, not confrontation. One of the most pivotal pieces of evidence, the video of Mary Catherine's police interrogation, ultimately couldn't be used in court because the audio was completely missing. Although she was believed to have made a confession during the recording, the exact content couldn't be verified. In addition, there were serious issues with how the firearm was handled. Officers admitted they placed the gun in a paper bag to prevent Mary Catherine from potentially harming herself. But they failed to document its original position or photograph the scene before moving the evidence. These gaps in evidence collection and protocol significantly affected the outcome of the trial. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom in a tense atmosphere. Mary Catherine Higdon was acquitted on all charges. Some jurors later admitted that while they believed she may have caused Stephen's death, the prosecution had failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And so on June 26th, Mary Catherine walked out of jail, a free woman. But for Stephen Freeman's loved ones, the verdict came as a heartbreaking blow. To them, justice isn't only about legal procedures, it's also about a truth that can be felt deeply by the family left behind. Most notably, Stephen's mother chose to speak out rather than stay silent. Since her son's death, she has become a vocal advocate in campaigns aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence. In her view, abuse isn't always easy to recognize, and the victims aren't always women. Men can be hurt too. They can be beaten, manipulated, or live in constant fear. She emphasizes that violence doesn't discriminate based on gender, and for that reason, the name Stephen Freeman deserves to be remembered as part of that truth. Although the court has issued its verdict, the echoes of the case haven't faded. Unanswered questions, overlooked evidence, and hidden corners that were never fully illuminated, all of it remains like an open wound in the hearts of the victim's family and the local community. Story 4. On the early morning of August 26, 2012, a horrifying scene was discovered at kilometer marker 793 on the Beijing-Tibet Highway within the jurisdiction of Urid Front Banner, Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. A charred corpse lay in the middle of a desolate wasteland bearing clear signs of a gruesome crime. Who was the victim, and what had caused a human being to suffer such a tragic end? When investigators arrived at the scene, they were immediately overwhelmed by the haunting sight. The body of a man had been doused with gasoline and set on fire, burned beyond recognition. The torso had almost completely turned to ash, with only the head, right arm, and feet remaining intact. The acrid smell of burning still lingered in the air, mixing with the desolation of the roadside area. Clearly this was not a random accident, but a brutal murder, deliberately planned to erase all traces. The forensic team immediately conducted an autopsy. Results showed the victim was a male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, estimated to be between 18 and 25 years old. Notably, he had not died from the fire. Experts found at least 9 fatal wounds from a hard object, repeatedly striking the head area, causing severe cranial trauma, and completely deforming the skull. It was these brutal blows that claimed the victim's life, before his body was doused with gasoline and burned. This completely ruled out the possibility of a traffic accident, followed by body disposal, confirming this as a cold-blooded crime. The perpetrator had deliberately murdered the victim, then attempted to destroy all evidence by burning the body to cover their tracks. Another important detail was that there were no blood traces at the scene. The body was carefully wrapped in a cotton blanket and tightly bound with steel wire. These signs led police to conclude that where the body was found was not the primary crime scene. It appeared the perpetrator had killed the victim elsewhere, then transported the body here for disposal. The choice of such a remote location, about 6 miles from residential areas and near the foot of Wula Mountain, showed the cold, calculated cruelty of the killer. Faced with this challenging case, the investigation team's most urgent task was to identify the victim. However, the body had no identification documents, and the face had been so destroyed by fire that recognition was impossible. In this desperate situation, police had to rely on the physical clues remaining at the scene. At the scene, they recovered 2 keys, one bearing the Gully brand, commonly used for apartment doors, and another with the Bio Dion brand, typically used for security doors. Additionally, on the victim's clothing were several metal buttons that hadn't completely burned, still bearing the English logo, Jack and Jones. A black plastic bag used to cover the victim's head was also found, with printed text reading, "Protect the environment and protect China's environment." Though limited, These pieces of evidence provided some initial information about the victim and his living circumstances. However, investigators had to acknowledge that these items were quite common in the market. Using them to trace the victim's identity or the perpetrator would be a difficult and time-consuming task. To gather more information, the task force used local media to broadcast missing person alerts with basic identifying characteristics of the victim. However, after some time, the responses about missing persons cases didn't match the characteristics of the body found at the scene. The case seemed to reach a dead end from the very beginning, while everything appeared stalled. Investigators began analyzing the perpetrator's behavior in detail. Why had the killer chosen such a disposal site? Though desolate, this was a location along a highway where traffic passed continuously. While not always busy, the chance of discovery was still higher than choosing a truly isolated location. An important hypothesis emerged. Perhaps the perpetrator was not a local, someone from elsewhere who was unfamiliar with the terrain, possibly transporting the body from outside into the yard front banner area for disposal, and randomly choosing a location they thought was sufficiently remote. Police conducted a more detailed analysis of the timing of the crime, based on autopsy results. The victim's time of death was estimated at around 7 to 8 p.m. on August 25th. Meanwhile, the time the body was set on fire was around 4 to 5 a.m. on August 26th. This meant there was a gap of up to 9 hours between when the victim was murdered and when the body was disposed of. Unexpected information from Beijing-Tibet highway traffic, police significantly narrowed the investigation scope. From the night of August 25th until about 1 to 2 a.m. on August 26th, the Beijing-Tibet highway had very strict traffic inspections at entry and exit points. This meant those transporting the body would have been very cautious and unlikely to transport the body during this time period. Most likely, the perpetrator waited until after 1 to 2 a.m. when the inspections ended before beginning to move. If so, with about 3 to 4 hours of travel time before burning the body at 4 to 5 a.m., the perpetrator's starting range would be significantly narrowed. The investigation focused on major cities east of the Beijing-Tibet highway within a 3 to 4 hour travel radius, including Baotou, Hohat, and Ordos. All three cities were large urban areas with hundreds of thousands of residents, making the search for clues still challenging. While investigators were still struggling with the broad investigation scope, a seemingly meaningless detail at the scene suddenly caught their attention. On both sides of the highway, near where the body was discovered, 2 chains of cement bricks were found. One chain with 6 bricks and another with 3 bricks, one of which was broken, totaling 9 bricks. Each brick weighed about 4 to 7 pounds, with the total weight of both chains reaching about 44 pounds. What was special was that they were tied together with the same type of steel wire used to bind the victim's body. After consulting with experts, police determined that this type of cement brick was not used on the Beijing-Tibet highway. This led to an important deduction. These brick chains had definitely been brought to the scene by the perpetrator. But why such heavy bricks? Investigators proposed a bold hypothesis. Most likely, the perpetrator initially intended to sink the body in a river, with these bricks serving as weights to ensure the body would sink deep and never surface. This hypothesis led to another question. If they intended to sink the body, why didn't the perpetrator follow through? Both Hohat and Ordos were cities where the route to the crime scene would pass the Yellow River, or its tributaries. If starting from these 2 cities, the perpetrator could have easily chosen a more convenient location to sink the body underwater, ensuring much more discreet disposal than burning the body by the highway. From this, the task force made a breakthrough deduction. Perhaps the perpetrator had started from a city where the route to the scene had no suitable rivers or lakes for sinking the body. When examining maps, investigators discovered that from Biota, a major city in Inner Mongolia traveling west along the Beijing-Tibet highway to the Seine, a distance of over 60 miles, there were no rivers or lakes large enough to carry out body sinking. This hypothesis strongly supported the assessment that Biota was the most likely starting point for the killer. With the investigation scope narrowed to Biota City, the task force began analyzing the victim more carefully. Based on physical evidence, this man was 5 feet 9 inches tall, aged 18 to 25. His use of Gully and Boeotian brand keys suggested he might have lived in an apartment. The Jack and Jones clothing brand was typically only sold in large shopping malls at relatively high prices, indicating the victim had fairly good economic conditions. Additionally, through examination, The victim's feet were smooth without calluses, showing he was not someone who regularly did heavy manual labor. The cement bricks used for urban landscaping found at the scene also reinforced the likelihood that the victim was a city dweller. In summary, police had built a fairly detailed profile of the victim. A young male, 5 feet 9 inches tall, with good economic conditions, living in an apartment in a major city, and not doing manual labor. With these characteristics, a task force of over 30 members was established to comprehensively review missing person cases in Biota City. However, after a week of effort, all searches yielded no results. It seemed no one among the missing persons matched the victim's profile. The murder case had reached another dead end. The golden 7-day period for solving the case had passed, but police still hadn't found a breakthrough clue. Pressure increasingly weighed on the investigators' shoulders. At this point, the task force decided to change their approach. If finding missing persons was difficult, why not try to find the perpetrator's vehicle used to transport the body? Although the disposal scene had no surveillance cameras or witnesses, the highway entry and exit points did. Police hoped to find a suspicious vehicle by reviewing video from toll booth cameras. Initially, they hypothesized that the perpetrator's vehicle would have abnormal travel time, longer than usual, due to stopping to dispose of the body. However, when they began implementation, investigators realized the difficulty of the task. There were thousands of entry and exit points on the Beijing-Tibet highway, and on the night of the murder, over 20,000 vehicles had passed through this area. Examining each vehicle, determining schedules, vehicle types, and drivers was an enormous workload that seemed nearly impossible. Nevertheless, with extraordinary persistence, after 5 to 6 days of continuously reviewing tens of thousands of video segments, investigators finally discovered a suspicious vehicle. It was a black Toyota sedan. This vehicle had entered the highway from about to entrance at 4:06 a.m., and at 5:47 a.m. the same day, it appeared at an exit near Woola Mountain close to the disposal scene. The distance from the bow to entrance to the Woola Mountain exit was only about 60 miles, but this vehicle had taken 1 hour and 41 minutes to travel, about 40 minutes slower than normal driving time. This abnormal travel time had put the vehicle in police crosshairs. The abnormality of the black Toyota sedan didn't stop at travel time. When the vehicle entered the highway from bow to its license plate was still clearly visible as BDA 991. However, when it appeared at the Woola Mountain exit, the license plate had been carefully covered with some kind of cloth. The deliberate concealment of the license plate, combined with the suspiciously extended travel time and passing through the exact area of the disposal scene, made this vehicle the task force's #1 suspect. Police immediately checked information about license plate BDA 991. However, the check results surprised them. This plate actually belonged to an SUV, not a sedan. This confirmed that the black Toyota was using a fake license plate. Although the license plate was fake, the vehicle had entered the highway. In-toll booth cameras had recorded clear images of 2 men sitting in the car, a driver and a passenger. Police continued reviewing surveillance cameras along the entire route, and about 30 minutes after leaving the Woola Mountain exit, at 6:17 a.m., the same day, the black Toyota sedan reappeared at another highway entrance. This time it bore a different license plate, PH1111. Checking information about license plate PH1111, police determined this was the vehicle's real plate. The vehicle's owner was a woman named Li Menghan. However, through investigation, the person who regularly used this vehicle was her husband, Li Bing. Li Bing was a man originally from Anshan, Liaoning Province, currently running a bathhouse service center in Baoda. With this information, police quickly found the black Toyota parked near Li Bing's bathhouse in Baoda. The shape, model, and even small details on the vehicle matched perfectly with the car that had appeared at the scene. All clues pointed to Li Bing. The task force decided to approach Li Bing to clarify the matter. However, when they contacted him, Li Bing was out of town. Police showed Li Bing's family photos of the 2 men in the Toyota from surveillance cameras, and the family confirmed it was not Li Bing. This made the situation more complicated. If Li Bing wasn't the driver who had used his vehicle on the night of the murder, over the phone, Li Bing explained that the day before the murder occurred, he had lent the vehicle to an old hometown friend named Zhang Tiqiang. Tiqiang had returned the car to him the following afternoon. Li Bing also mentioned that when he got the car back, he noticed it had been cleaned very thoroughly, both inside and outside. This detail immediately raised police suspicions, as thorough cleaning after borrowing a car seemed like abnormal behavior. Through investigation, police realized Tik Yong was not an unfamiliar name. At that time, he was 39 years old and had married a woman in Baotou a few years earlier. Tik Yong had once been a businessman, but later fell into gambling and high-interest lending activities. More alarmingly, Tik Yong was also a suspect in a murder case that occurred in September 2011 in Aoxa League, Inner Mongolia. In that case, he and some accomplices had caused one person's death and seriously injured another in a street fight. After that incident, Tik Yong had fled and was being pursued. With this information, all suspicions pointed toward Tik Yong. He had a criminal record, motive to hide crimes, and was using this suspicious vehicle. However, finding Tik Yong wasn't easy either. Li Bing said Tik Yong frequently changed phone numbers and locations. After the Aoxa case occurred, his phone number had also been cancelled. Although Li Bing and Tik Yong were from the same hometown and had a close relationship from over 15 years ago, Li Bing insisted he had no knowledge of Tik Yong's current whereabouts. Police suspected Li Bing was hiding something. The task force decided to pressure Li Bing. They argued that he would lend a friend a car worth over $30,000 without knowing clearly about that person or their residence. After multiple exchanges, persuasion, and analysis of the troubles he might face if he continued concealing information, Li Bing finally provided an address, a rental house in Biota, where Tik Yong and his associates had once lived. With the address in hand, the task force quickly went to the rental house. But when they arrived, the house was empty. Everything apparently cleaned out. Police were disappointed, but still decided to thoroughly examine every corner of the house. Then in the bathroom, they found a small blood stain on the wall. This blood sample was quickly collected and sent for testing. The test results shocked everyone. This blood belonged to the victim in the highway burning case. The discovery of the victim's blood in Tik Yong's rental house confirmed one thing. This was indeed the primary crime scene where the crime had actually occurred. Although the room had been thoroughly cleaned, the small blood stain remaining on the wall had become irrefutable evidence. This strengthened the hypothesis that Tik Yong and his associates were closely connected to the murder and body disposal. The deeper investigators examined the more unusual details they discovered in the house. On the floor, a layer of dark green paint had been applied. The landlord said this paint was applied by Tik Yong before leaving. This action was also very strange. Why repaint the entire house before returning it? Were they trying to hide something under this paint layer? But what truly amazed investigators beyond belief was when they tried using the two keys found on the victim's body. One key opened the apartment door, and the other opened the security door of this rental house. This perfect match was not just a clue, but a chilling confirmation. Either the victim had a very close relationship with this house, or the perpetrator had deliberately placed the keys on the body to mislead or convey some message. This only increased the mystery and complexity of the case. Tik Yong, the fugitive, became the #1 suspect. Where he was and who his accomplices were became the most urgent questions needing answers. Next, police checked the rental records. The lease contract showed the renter was a young woman named Li Xiaoxia, born in 1996 from Jiangxi province. The task force immediately contacted Xi'an police to search for information about Xiaoxia. Feedback from Xi'an indicated that Xiaoxia had left her hometown to work elsewhere several years ago and had uncertain whereabouts. This was the only clue to find Tik Yong, so police decided to concentrate all efforts on finding Xiaoxia. A search warrant and comprehensive surveillance arrangement for Xiaoxia were issued. A few days later, important information was received. A woman using an ID card with Xiaoxia's name had accessed the internet at an internet cafe in Wuhai City, Inner Mongolia. The task force immediately traveled to Wuhai and quickly apprehended this woman. However, during interrogation, she claimed she was not Xiaoxia, but named Sun Lin. Sun Lin explained that Xiaoxia's ID card was given to her by a friend, and she didn't know Xiaoxia at all. Police continued investigating and discovered Sun Lin had received this ID card in summer 2011, and a few months later, Tik Yong's rental house was leased under Xiaoxia's name. Could Sun Lin have impersonated Xiaoxia to rent the house for Tik Yong? Faced with police's persistent questioning, Sun Lin finally confessed the truth. She confirmed that in October 2011, she had impersonated Xiaoxia to rent the apartment at her boyfriend Wang Dongdong's request. Sun Lin explained that Dongdong and Tik Yong had a close brotherhood relationship and both were fugitives who had fled after the Alslage murder case in September 2011. Along with them was another man named Zhongbai. Turned out Zhongbai was the man who had sat in the passenger seat of the black Toyota sedan with Tiqiang on the night of the body disposal. After the Aoxa murder case, all three Dongdong, Tiqiang and Zhongbai had to flee. Having criminal records and being wanted, they didn't dare show their faces to rent housing, so they asked Sun Lin to use the fake ID card to rent the apartment. Sun Lin continued, explaining that after fleeing with her boyfriend Dong Dong and his associates for over 6 months, she felt this life of hiding had no future. The hopelessness and despair caused her to frequently argue with Dong Dong about a week before the burning case occurred. On August 17, 2012, after a major argument, Sun Lin decided to leave them. Going alone to Wuhai and cutting off all contact, even changing her phone's SIM card. She insisted she knew nothing about Tiqiang and his associates' current whereabouts. Sun Lin's testimony provided important links, helping the task force better understand Tiqiang's criminal network. Now police knew the burning case didn't just involve Tiqiang, but might also include participation from Zhongbai and Dong Dong, Sun Lin's boyfriend. However, where they were remained a big question. Police returned to information about Tiqiang. He was an only child. His mother died early, and his elderly father was suffering from a stroke and living alone in their hometown without anyone to care for him. Before the Aoxa murder case occurred, Tiqiang had brought his father to Baotou for convenient care, and the elderly man was living with Tiqiang's in-laws. Additionally, Tiqiang had a 3-year-old daughter. With a sick father and young child, police speculated that despite being on the run, Tiqiang would certainly try to contact his family. This was precisely the weakness, the only thread that could pull him out of the shadows. Police decided to secretly monitor Tiqiang's in-laws' family. Before long, their efforts were rewarded. Investigators discovered Tiqiang and his associates were still renting an apartment in a Bao, 2 residential area, just 1 wall away from his in-laws' house. This showed Tiqiang's recklessness and overconfidence, thinking he could hide right under the police's noses and live close to his family. The task force immediately planned to capture operation. After many days of close surveillance, finding the right opportunity, police stormed the apartment. The first person captured was Zhongbai. He was completely surprised and couldn't resist. Right after, Tiqiang was also captured in a similar state. 2 of the 3 suspects from the Aoxa case and the main suspects in the burning case were finally caught. After Tiqiang and Zhongbei were brought to the police station, investigators began interrogation. Both had endured over 6 months of fearful fugitive life since the Aoxa case. The pressure, worry about an uncertain future, and exhaustion meant they couldn't remain silent forever. When faced with irrefutable evidence, Tiqiang and Zhongbei finally revealed a horrifying truth that shocked police. The murder victim was Wang Dongdong's Sun Lin's boyfriend, and also their accomplice in the Aoxa case. According to Tiqiang and Zhangbai's confessions, Dongdong's death was by Tiqiang's hand. In reality, the relationship among these 3 fugitives had been fractured for a long time. Tiqiang recounted that in the Aoxa murder case, he had only sat behind the wheel as the driver, not directly attacking the victim. This detail was later confirmed by police through investigation records of the Aoxa case. Because of this, Tiqiang always believed his guilt wasn't too severe. During the exhausting days of hiding, he had developed the intention to surrender, hoping for legal leniency and to end the underground life soon. What he desired most was to return to care for his sick elderly father and be with his young daughter. However, this intention immediately met fierce opposition from Dong Dong. Because Dong Dong was the one who had directly acted in the Aoxa case, if caught, he would certainly face a much heavier sentence. He adamantly refused to surrender and wouldn't allow anyone in the group to be exposed. From here, the conflict between Tiqiang and Dong Dong became increasingly tense, becoming the fuse for the subsequent tragedy. On the afternoon of August 26, 2012, Tiqiang and Dong Dong sat drinking in the rental apartment. Alcohol made long simmering contradictions flare up once again. The argument about surrendering became intense, and then Dong Dong suddenly demanded 100,000 yuan from Taikong before standing up to leave. When Taikong replied he had no money, Dong Dong immediately made a vicious threat. He would seek revenge by attacking Taikong's wife, children, and sick elderly father. That threat was the last straw. In a rage of fury and feeling cornered, Dong Dong grabbed a knife, while Tiqiang quickly picked up a hammer. The chaotic struggle lasted only a few seconds, but determined everything. In blind anger, Taekyung swung the hammer twice in succession at Dongdong's head. The victim collapsed immediately and died on the spot, ending the argument with a tragic outcome that couldn't be undone. After Dongdong died, Taekyung and Jongbei sat silently in the living room for a long time. Both were shocked and regretful about what had happened. After a period of chaotic thinking, he decided he must cover up this incident at all costs. Taekyung knew clearly that he already had a criminal record and now had caused another murder case, certainly facing a very heavy sentence. In his mind was only one thought. He must hide this crime at all costs to avoid being caught and not implicate his family. Immediately after, Taekyung and Jongbei hastily planned the disposal. With experience from driving many times on the Beijing-Tibet highway, Taekyung knew clearly that about 180 miles west of Baotou, there was a road crossing the Yellow River, an ideal location to sink the body and bury all evidence. That was their initial agreed plan. They prepared meticulously in panic, getting cotton blankets to wrap the body, using steel wire to tie it tightly, then borrowing Li Bing's Toyota sedan as transportation. Everything happened amid heavy breathing and fear, and by the time they left, it was nearly 3 a.m. Jongbei drove, the two fugitives racing along the highway hoping to reach the Yellow River before dawn. But when the car stopped at kilometer 793, exactly where the body was later discovered, it was nearly 5 a.m. The thin light of dawn appearing in the east made Taekyung realize they couldn't continue the journey without being discovered. The plan to sink the body collapsed midway, and in that moment, they were forced to make a new decision, hasty and full of risk. In a situation with no way back, Taekyung and Jongbei were forced to change their disposal plan immediately. They stopped at a gas station along the highway. Amid chaos and overwhelming fear, Taekyung had a desperate thought: use gasoline from the car itself to burn the body. Right by the roadside. This place was desolate, empty of passers-by at dawn, and they believed the fire would erase all traces. In Taekyung's mind, hundreds of negative thoughts intertwined, suffocating reason and leaving only blind determination. Hide the crime at any cost. After Dongdong's body was consumed by flames, both quietly returned to the rental apartment. There they began meticulously erasing traces, wiping every corner, especially places that might have blood. The dark green paint layer on the floor that police discovered later was also part of the effort to hide the crime. However, Taekyung confessed an additional unexpected detail. The paint wasn't just to erase traces, but also an impulsive act of anger. Originally, their rental contract extended to October 2012, but after the murder, they wanted to return the house early and demanded back 1 month's rent. When refused by the landlord, Taekyung vented his fury by painting the entire floor green, considering it a final act of revenge. The deeper the interrogation went, the more police understood the tragedy Taekyung had created for himself. He once had a normal life, doing business but wrong choices. Falling into gambling and illegal activities had pushed him onto a criminal path. The Oksa case was just the beginning of a chain of subsequent tragedies. Pressure from fugitive life, exhaustion from living in fear, combined with family burdens, a sick elderly father, and young children made him long to end everything. However, instead of finding an opportunity to start over, he chose confrontation, leading to a new murder, bringing even more severe consequences. Taekyung confessed that every time he lay down and closed his eyes, he thought about what had happened, about his wife and children, his elderly father. He was extremely regretful, but everything was too late. That regret haunted him every day, every hour. He had lost everything: freedom, family, and even conscience. Jongbei, accomplice in both cases, also had a similar fate. He had chosen to follow the wrong path, and now had to pay a heavy price for his actions. The fugitive life not only made him lose freedom, but also forced him to live in constant fear and haunting nightmares. Dongdong, the man who died at Taekyung's hands, also had a past full of mistakes. He was the one who directly caused the Okseo murder case, and his uncooperative attitude and vicious threats against Taekyung ultimately led to his own tragic death. Police discovered that during Taekyung's fugitive period, lacking money, he had contacted his wife in broadband law, asking for money. Providing money to a fleeing criminal made Taekyung's wife and brother-in-law suspected of harboring a criminal, and they were also temporarily detained for investigation. Even Sun Lin, Dongdong's girlfriend, who initially tried to separate herself from this group, couldn't avoid implication. Her use of a fake ID card to rent housing for Taekyung's group during their fugitive period resulted in her temporary detention for harboring criminals. Though she had tried to rebuild her life in Wuhai, the past and mistakes in her relationship with Dong Dong ultimately dragged her into legal trouble. Finally, Taekyung and Jongbei received death sentences. The remaining related persons also faced appropriate sentences for their actions. The case of Taekyung, Dong Dong, and Jongbei was not just a brutal crime that shocked public opinion, but also a haunting warning about the consequences of wrong choices. Just because of falling into gambling, violence, and hatred, people who once had normal lives pushed themselves onto a path with no escape. Dong Dong's death, the capture of Taekyung and Jongbei, and the consequences their families had to bear are clear proof that crime can never be erased by concealment. Be brave enough to face your mistakes, seek help from trustworthy people, and follow the law. Only then can we find peace of mind and shield our loved ones from pain. That lesson closes a bloody chapter, but the journey to uncover the crime has not stopped. Because right after that, another case with equally tragic and shocking details is waiting for us to discover. Story 5. Now we're going to be taking a look into another terrible case with you. Have you ever wondered why most horror stories start with a happy scene? This must have been what went through the minds of those who were terribly affected by the sudden death of the 19-year-old Andrea Vasquez. She doesn't deserve this. We're just trying to process all of this. A young lady whose life of love with her dear boyfriend was abruptly and brutally ended. Let's find out how this bright and loving relationship tragically took a dark and unexpected turn. Andrea Vasquez, the 19-year-old victim of a gruesome murder and kidnap, was born and raised in Downey, where she lived in a one-story house with her father, Eduardo Vasquez, mother, Ana Vasquez, and her older sister, Edwin Vasquez. She has been described as Hispanic, 5 feet 3 inches, with brownish-red hair and brown eyes. She was a fashion student at Fullerton College, and she was just about to begin her second year at the school shortly before her life was unexpectedly cut short. She also worked at a mall in Cerritos. She had dreams and aspirations to become a well-known, established fashion icon, making a name for herself in the industry. She was said to be a quiet, introverted, and devoted child with a good sense of humor, always lighting up the atmosphere wherever she found herself. She did not move with many friends, but she was said to have had good friends who loved her selflessly and had good, fun times with her. She wanted the good, comfortable life of a famous clothing designer. And she also desired to become a millionaire. She liked to keep her room organized and neat. In an interview with her sister, Edwin, she said Andrea would always complain when someone left her stuff out of place. However, Andrea always created a space for her pets in the house. Andrea had had various career choices, as she first wanted to be a veterinarian, although her choice changed down the line. Andrea Vasquez had a loving relationship with her family. Her mother, Ana, said that her daughter was really good at lifting people's moods. She mentioned one of her friends had an accident and was left in a wheelchair, and Andrea, by talking to him, lifted him up from the sadness he had. She also said that Andrea made her days happier many times. Andrea also really enjoyed listening to music. Her favorite artist was Kelia Cheese, who also inspired her dressing style. Her mother said that she always talked about wanting to design clothes for artists and expensive brands, and even create her own online boutique. Fashion design professor, Renee Young, taught Andrea when she started schooling at Fullerton College. She had completed her first year as a fashion major and was about to start her second year just days before she was murdered. Young said that Andrea had a unique style of designing and always pushed herself to do more. Her teacher added that Andrea was always on top of what was trending at the moment. She knew the trending designs in her fashion gallery, which she made as a final project, was one of the most unique in that class. She was also in a beautiful relationship with her boyfriend, who chose to remain anonymous. The news of her death really surprised and hurt her loved ones and those who were around her. Just let her go. Just drop her off anywhere. The hospital, please, if you could just find it in your heart, just please let her go. She's my life. She's a little girl. She's everything for me. Andrea lived the ideal life for most ladies of her age. Most ladies younger than she was must have aspired to be like her, looking up to her. She had ambitions which she was actively pursuing. With the full support of her loved ones, she had a family that cherished her, and she was dating the guy she was in love with. Andrea's boyfriend described every moment with her as a dream. Andrea's boyfriend, who wishes to remain anonymous, expressed the depth of his love for Andrea, describing every moment with her as a dream. I loved her more than anybody could have said. Every moment with her was like a dream, you know? However, The dream turned into a nightmare when a truck pulled up on that fateful night, opening fire on the young couple as they sat on the trunk of their car. Maybe there were some hidden details about Andrea's ideal life that eventually led to her death. The last time Andrea Vasquez was seen was shortly after midnight on Sunday, 20th of August, 2023, in the parking lot of Penn Park, located at Penn Street, according to a statement from Whittier Police Department. The police were trying to piece together what happened to Andrea, and they were hoping someone could have seen her. They were saying she was last spotted wearing a pretty distinctive outfit, a black long-sleeve crop top, khaki pants, and black low-top Converse shoes. That's a pretty specific description, so they hoped maybe someone would remember seeing her in that getup. Also, the police mentioned that Andrea had a couple of tattoos that might help identify her. She had got a tattoo on the back of her neck that says Edlin, her sister's name, and another one on the top of her right hand that shows the Aries constellation. The police were really hoping someone would come forward with information about Andrea's disappearance. Maybe someone saw her with someone suspicious, or maybe someone knows something about her whereabouts. Whatever it was, every little bit could count in this case. She was in the car with her boyfriend when an armed suspect got close, approached the car, and began firing shots in their direction. Andrea Vasquez's boyfriend ran off the scene of the shooting to avoid getting hit by the bullets being fired and to seek help. But when he returned, he saw blood near his car, and he found out that his girlfriend, Andrea Vasquez, was missing. He became nervous and suspected that the person who shot at them had kidnapped Andrea, while he ran away to save his life. He did not know if she was dead or alive before she was taken away, but he knew for sure that the love of his life was in severe danger, and he needed to get all the help he could before things escalated beyond anyone's control. Andrea's boyfriend described the killer as someone with no emotion in his eyes. According to him, the suspect looked like he was on a mission, and he did not have a heart. Andrea's family and boyfriend became desperate to get help. Andrea Vasquez's sister, Edlin Vasquez, who she lived with in Los Angeles, put out a plea with a Facebook post to alert the public and ask for their help in finding her sister. She wrote that her sister was shot and kidnapped at Penn Park, and her last location, according to what she tracked, showed Moreno Valley. Me and my sister share locations. I follow the location all the way to the last ping. I get there before any cops. I get there, and all I see is a pile of blood. Out of anxiety, she added that her sister's condition was currently unknown, as no one had heard anything from her or about her from anyone. She pleaded that if anyone had any information concerning her missing sister, they should share by contacting her. She ended the post by telling people to kindly help her repost, so that the notice about her missing sister could reach more people. They contacted the local police department and gave them Andrea's location, which they tracked through her phone. However, during the entire process, they ran into a problem. The local police told them that they had to go to Whittier Police, but Ana Vasquez, who was visibly shaken, complained out of fear that she couldn't even drive. They said, "Have to go to Whittier Police." And I said, "I can't even drive." I was shaking. "I cannot drive." And they said, "Then you have to wait till they come here." When retired LAPD Detective Moses Castillo learned of the incident and the response of the local police, he questioned it, emphasizing that the Downey police should have chased the kidnapper, even if it meant going into another area. In response to the criticism by the Whittier police, the Downey Police Department joined the investigation on August 20th. Why couldn't they do that? It was as simple as that. You get in that car, code 3, and respond towards that way. And on the way over there, you start communicating to your communications, notify CHP, let's get an airship, let's get resources running in that direction, and connect with the lead agency to get on the same page. After the Whittier Police Department asked for help finding Andrea's boyfriend, because he was the one who had been with Andrea and had seen her being attacked, the Downey officers immediately got into action. They quickly found and spoke with the boyfriend at Andrea's parents' home in Downey, just 10 minutes after getting the call. They gathered the necessary information from Andrea's boyfriend and Andrea's family, sharing details like her phone's location data with Whittier officers. Downey and Whittier police worked together to try to find Andrea, but unfortunately, her body was later found in a field in Moreno Valley. It was a sad and unfortunate discovery that caused absolute grief for Andrea's boyfriend and her family. It was around 11:50 p.m. local time, Monday, 21st of August, that the investigators in charge of the murder and kidnap case found Vasquez's body in a vegetation field off Alessandro Boulevard and Merwin Street in Moreno Valley. After the news of Andrea Vasquez's horror kidnapping, people came out to start a huge search to try to find the missing 19-year-old. And that search ended in tragedy when the authorities, who were thoroughly searching the area of Moreno Valley, made a gruesome discovery. Actually, it is unclear where and how exactly she died. The investigation remains ongoing, but police said that it seems that the attack on Andrea Vasquez and her boyfriend was randomly targeted. Gabriel Esparza, a 20-year-old from Whittier in Los Angeles County, was arrested for kidnapping and shooting 19-year-old Andrea Vasquez. What's really surprising is that Gabriel is the son of a California fire captain. The police department arrested and took Gabriel Esparza into custody at his job in Lakewood without any problems. They also found the weapon he used to shoot Andrea and her boyfriend, as well as his truck, a 2013 white Toyota Tacoma. He was also charged with murder and kidnapping, and he's being held in jail with no chance of bail. This was a really serious case. The case was sent to the district attorney's office on August 23rd, so they could take it even more seriously and keep the necessary investigation going. The police department did not share any more details because they were still looking into it, and that made sense since they wanted to make sure they got all the facts straight. The prosecutors mentioned that Gabriel Esparza was accused of shooting at Andrea Vasquez and her boyfriend in a random attack. He was said to have kidnapped Andrea Vasquez after shooting her. He tried to rape her before dumping her body in a field. Funny enough, Gabriel Esparza's attorney, Ambrosio Rodriguez, described him as a good and well-brought-up kid from a good family, whose father is a Los Angeles County Fire Department captain. He said that everyone involved in and following the case were in shock, and everyone who knew him could not wrap their heads around the fact that he had been charged with that crime. He added that Gabriel Esparza was actually scared, and he was only beginning to understand what was happening after the crime had been committed. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaskin announced on the 23rd of April that Gabriel Sean Esparza, of Whittier, was charged with 1 count of murder, 1 count of willful, deliberate, and premeditated attempted murder, 1 count of kidnapping to commit rape, 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count of assault with intent to commit rape, and 2 counts of attempted forcible rape. Also, Gabriel Sean Esparza was accused of committing murder during the course of a kidnapping, and also of committing murder during the course of an attempted rape. So the police are saying that Gabriel Sean Esparza did not just commit these crimes. He actually used a rifle himself while doing them. And we are talking about all 7 of the charges against him. It's important to note that Gabriel is actually quite young, and it's always tragic when someone so young gets involved in a case as horrible as that of Andrea Vasquez. The district attorney's office is responsible for making sure that people are held accountable for their actions, and that was exactly what was happening in this case. The district attorney expressed his deep sympathies with the family of Andrea Vasquez. He said that the hearts of everyone on the side of Andrea Vasquez ached for the extremely painful loss of Andrea Vasquez's young life. He stated that the cruel nature of the crime, including the murder, kidnapping, and attempted rape on Andrea Vasquez, was very shocking, and it had a terrible effect at the very core of the community. District Attorney Gaskin said that his office will work very hard and tirelessly to hold Gabriel Sean Esparza accountable for his brutal actions against Ms. Vasquez and her partner. In that moment of grief, he also sent his deepest condolences to the family of Ms. Andrea Vasquez as they were coping with the painful tragedy that had befallen their family. Gabriel Esparza said he was not guilty of the charges against him. His next court date was set for October 25, 2023 at the Clara Shortridge Falls Criminal Justice Center, where a judge would have to decide if there was enough evidence to send the case to trial. He was being held in jail with no chance of bail. If he was found guilty, he could face life in prison with no chance of parole. Just 2 months after Gabriel Esparza pleaded not guilty to charges in relation to Fullerton College student Andrea Vasquez's death, his preliminary hearing was pushed to January 2024 by a Los Angeles Superior Court judge. The day of the hearing was a tough day for the loved ones of Andrea Vasquez, who was tragically murdered. About 30 of her family and friends showed up to a courtroom in downtown Los Angeles to support her and seek justice even in her death. The man accused of taking her life, Gabriel Sean Esparza, was in court for the first time, and it was a pretty emotional scene. The judge, Carrie White, decided to schedule another hearing for January 23, 2024 to determine if there was enough evidence to move forward with the case. This was according to an email from Vanis Dunn, who worked with the LA County District Attorney's Office. It was actually worth noting that Gabriel Sean Esparza, the accused, had already pleaded not guilty to the 7 charges against him, which included murder, kidnapping, and attempted rape. He made this plea back on August 23, 2023, but the day of the hearing was an important step in the process. The loved ones of Andrea Vasquez were seeking justice and closure, and they were hoping that the legal system would deliver. The Vasquez family were really going through a tough time at that point. Their advocate and spokesperson, Moses Castillo, who used to be a detective with the LAPD, said that the preliminary hearings for the guy accused of murdering, kidnapping, and raping Andrea Gabriel Esparza might go on for a whole year, or even into 2025 before the actual trial starts. That's a long time to wait for justice, and it's understandable that the family was anxious for closure. Some of Andrea's loved ones showed up to the courthouse wearing white t-shirts with her picture and birthday on them which said, "In loving memory." It was a really sweet way to honor her and keep her memory alive. The t-shirts were a small but powerful way for the family to show their love and support for each other during that extremely difficult time. A few family members and friends got to the courthouse early, probably to get settled and composed before the hearing started. But a big group of them, including Andrea's mom and sister, showed up just as the hearing was about to start. They all wanted to be there to support each other and make sure justice was properly and adequately served. It was heartwarming and amazing to see how the family were sticking together through all that they were going through. They had a sense of unity and support for one another despite the brutal occurrence. The whole scene was pretty emotional, with a lot of people showing up to support the Vasquez family and make sure that Esparza faced justice. It was clear that Andrea was loved by a lot of people, and her memory would live on through her family and friends. Later on, the accused Gabriel Esparza showed up to the courtroom wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. He was represented by his lawyer, Ambrosio Rodriguez, who was trying to defend him. But Esparza did not stay in the courtroom for long. He was taken back to custody after less than a minute. It was a really quick in and out. On the other side, the prosecutor, Beth Silverman, who was representing the state of California, joined the hearing remotely. But for some reason, only her voice was heard, no video. That was a bit unusual, but I guess it was not uncommon in those kinds of cases. Anyway, Moses Castillo, the Vasquez family's advocate and spokesperson, first heard about Andrea's disappearance through a post on Instagram from the Whittier Police Department back in August 2023. Can you believe it? Social media can be really powerful in spreading the word and getting help in situations like this. He later stated that little did he think that just a few hours later the family would reach out to him. So after Esparza was taken back into custody, Andrea's family left the courtroom and gathered in the hallway. They formed a circle around Moses Castillo, their advocate and spokesperson, so everyone could hear him clearly. Castillo spoke to them in Spanish, explaining what had just happened in court that morning and what they could expect in the coming weeks. He gave them a heads up that the next step was probably just going to be a date change, meaning the preliminary settings scheduled for January would likely just get a new date, but everything else would stay the same. Andrea's family was likely feeling a mix of emotions, relief that the process was moving forward, but also anxiety about what was likely to come. They were probably trying to stay strong and focused on getting justice for their loved one, and Castillo was there to support them every step of the way. The next preliminary settings still took place in the same courtroom in the Clara Shortridge Falls Criminal Justice Center in Los Angeles, but with a new date, and they hoped for some progress in the case. You know, it's really puzzling. The investigators haven't found any motive so far for why Andrea Vasquez was harmed. They're still trying to figure out what drove the suspect to do what he did. And the really scary thing is, officials think Andrea was just randomly targeted. That means she wasn't specifically chosen for any particular reason. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's so unsettling to think about, because we all walk around assuming we are safe, and then something like this happens and it shakes us up. The thought that someone could just be walking down the street minding their own business, and then get hurt for no reason at all. It's just really disturbing. Everyone concerned and connected to the family hoped that some answers were found for Andrea's family's sake and for the community's peace of mind. We all need to feel safe and secure, and when something like this happens, it takes away that sense of security. They hoped that the investigators would keep working hard to get to the bottom of the dreadful case and bring some closure to everyone who was affected in one way or the other. Andrea's sudden and violent death left a huge hole in her family's heart. I mean, can you imagine losing someone so dear to you so suddenly? One day they're here, and the next they're gone. And the worst part was, the family had been thrust into the spotlight because of it. Everyone wanted to know about the case, but hardly anyone had asked about Andrea's life. What she was like, what made her special, what memories they shared with her. As they waited for the case to move forward and sought justice for her murder, they were trying to focus on the good times, the happy memories they made with Andrea. They are remembering the laughter, the inside jokes, the moments that made her smile. They are holding on to those moments tightly, because that is all they have left of her now. It's so important to remember the person, not just the case. Andrea was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a loved one. She had dreams, hopes, fears, and desires. She had a life, and that life was cut short. Andrea's boyfriend, who was also affected by her sudden and violent death, shared his heartfelt feelings. He said, "I will always love her and miss her a lot every day." It's like he was acknowledging that she was gone, but her memory and their love would stay with him forever. He was not just saying it either. You could easily feel the pain and longing in his words. He's not alone either. Andrea's family and friends all felt the same way. They were trying to move forward, but it's hard when the wound is still so fresh. They were just taking it one day at a time, remembering the good times they shared with Andrea and trying to honor her memory in any way they could. It's amazing how love can be both a source of strength and a source of pain. On one hand, it gives us the courage to keep going, even in the toughest times. On the other hand, it makes us feel the loss even more deeply. But in the end, it's worth it, because love is what makes us human, and it's what makes life worth living. The entire family of Andrea never remained the same after the loss of their daughter. Her sister, Edwin, wrote on social media, alongside a picture of her beloved sister, "My beautiful angel, I'm completely destroyed. Words cannot describe this pain. I love you with all my heart and soul. Until we meet again, my beautiful baby, R.I.P." Another person added in tribute, "Right now there is no comfort or words to show our feeling. Know that my dear Andrea is resting in peace, and now she enjoys the presence of God." Enrique Vasquez, her grief-stricken father, shared his heartbreak with reporters, saying, "I lost my daughter, my angel. It's the saddest day." Her mother also expressed her deep hurt when she said, "It's a pain nobody deserves. She was my everything,